Fight or flight. Fight or flight. Are you familiar with this expression? If not, it means in a serious situation. What will you do? Will you fight, stand your ground, and try to attain victory? Or will you take flight, flee to live another day? Well, why bring this up? Why does it matter? Well, that's because soon the entire world, every single resident of it, will face an event that will make them choose fight or flight. What is this event? It's that which the Bible calls Armageddon. Now, what is Armageddon? If you were to ask a variety of people, you would likely get a variety of answers. But perhaps the most common answer would be that it's a complete and utter destruction of the earth. Was that the case, though? Is that really true? Well, let's see. The word for Armageddon comes from the Bible, so why not go to it to find out? Let's go there to Psalm 37:29, and we'll see what happens after Armageddon. Does the earth become desolate and uninhabitable? Psalm 37:29. The righteous will possess the earth, and they will live forever on it. So no, the earth will not be destroyed. Quite the opposite. It becomes the possession of the righteous. That is, those who live by God's standards of right and wrong. But who was missing from this? It was the unrighteous. But what happened to them? Let's go to now Proverbs 2:21 and 22. Proverbs 2:21 and 22. And there it says, "For only the upright will reside in the earth, and the blameless will remain in it. As for the wicked, they will be cut off from the earth, and the treacherous will be torn away from it." There was a key word in these two verses, and it's found actually in verse 21. Did you see it? It's only. Only the upright will reside in the earth. In other words, those who are found to be unrighteous will be done away with. They will perish. So yes, in this serious event of Armageddon, it becomes a good thing. But until that event happens and finishes, well, there's many things we want to know, we might have questions about. Let's think about three things today. First, will we need to fight during this event? How do we need to prepare? And why should we confidently look to Jehovah for deliverance? So let's go over our first point. Will we need to fight? There's a simple answer. No. Why is this, though? Because this war is not human versus humans, but between humans versus the Almighty. Also, we know Jesus' words found in Matthew 26:52. In just 6 words, return your sword to its place. Jesus makes clear that his followers do not engage in any form of violence. So then, if we will not be fighting, who will? Well, let's find out. Let's find comfort in this by looking at Revelation chapter 19. We'll look at over 3 verses. Revelation 19, first verse 11. Revelation 19:11. I saw heaven open, and look, a white horse, and the one seated on it is called Faithful and True, and he judges and carries out war in righteousness. So the rider of the white horse is that of Jesus, God's own son. And what was he doing? He was carrying on war in righteousness. And this is because he's executing Jehovah's judgments. Let's see a little bit more by now going down to verses 14 and 15. Also, the armies in heaven were following him on white horses, and they were clothed in white, clean, fine linen. And out of his mouth protrudes a sharp, long sword with which to strike the nations. And he will shepherd them with a rod of iron. Moreover, he treads the winepresses of the fury of the wrath of God the Almighty. So verse 14 told us that Jesus is not alone. The heavenly army is at his side. And then 15 goes on to show us that Jesus is acting on behalf of Jehovah, wanting to save the righteous ones. Does this ease your mind? Hopefully it does, because here we see that it's clear the second most powerful being in the universe is doing battle on behalf of God's people. So our role is not to learn how to use weapons, prepare for war. just simply to trust in the saving abilities of Jehovah and Jesus. Perhaps that sounds easier said than done. If so, we're going to look over a fine example Jehovah had recorded in the Bible to help us to improve our faith and to remember his saving abilities. It's found at 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verses 1 through 24. We won't read every single one, but we will go over the account. 2 Chronicles 20, let's start with verse 1 and 2, just the A portion of 2. The Moabites, the Ammonites, together with some of the Ammonim, came to wage war against Jehoshaphat. So Jehoshaphat was told, "A large crowd has come against you from the region of the sea." So yes, Jehoshaphat learns of a confederation of nations formed to fight against him and his people. This includes tens of thousands of soldiers, and these were not just conscripts barely trained. No, they are highly trained. They're bloodthirsty. They have no qualms about violence. So what does he do? Jehoshaphat. Let's continue on by reading verses 3 and 4. At that, Jehoshaphat became afraid, and he resolved to search for Jehovah. So he proclaimed a fast for all of Judah. The people of Judah then gathered together to inquire of Jehovah. They came from all the cities of Judah to consult Jehovah. So what did Jehoshaphat not do? He didn't say, "Men, get the weapons," or "Men, prepare to flee." No, he gathered everyone together and had them pray intensely to Jehovah as well as fast. Let's continue on now in verses 13 through 17. Meanwhile, all those of Judah were standing before Jehovah, along with their little ones, their wives, and their children. In the middle of the congregation, the Spirit of Jehovah came upon Jahaziel's son, Jahaziel. Let's go to 15 now. He said, "Pay attention, all of Judah, and you inhabitants of Jerusalem, and King Jehoshaphat. Here is what Jehovah says to you. Do not be afraid or terrified because of this large crowd, for the battle is not yours, but God's. Tomorrow, go down against them. They will be coming up by the pass of Ziz, and you will find them at the end of the valley, before the wilderness of Jeriel. You will not need to fight this battle. Take your position, stand still, and see the salvation of Jehovah in your behalf. O Judah and Jerusalem, do not be afraid or terrified. Tomorrow, go out against them, and Jehovah will be with you." So here we saw that the people met together, and then what happened is they received direction. And then in verses 16 and 17, we saw what Jehovah told them. It was very clear. It was a simple math formula. It was A, stand still. B, see the salvation. It was take your position as A, B, stand still, and that equaled seeing the salvation of Jehovah in your behalf. It was very simple. Again, not sharpening your swords or spears, set up an ambush, prepare for combat. Simply to stand back, have faith, see the salvation of Jehovah. Now, they were still to go towards the enemy. Does that sound like logical instruction? Go to your enemy who wants to harm you, but do nothing. No. Would you want to do that? No, not. But that is what Jehoshaphat did. Let's see now in verse 20. We'll continue our reading. They rose up early the next morning and went out of the wilderness of Tekoa. As they went out, Jehoshaphat stood up and said, "Listen to me, O Judah, and you inhabitants of Jerusalem. Put faith in Jehovah your God, so that you may be able to stand firm. Put faith in his prophets, and you will be successful." So the instructions may have not been logical by a human standpoint. Jehoshaphat followed them, and he encouraged the people to follow them. He gave a nice, wonderful speech saying, "Trust in Jehovah." Let's continue on our account. We'll conclude it by reading verses 22 through 24. When they began joyfully singing praises, Jehovah set an ambush against the men of Ammon, Moab, and the mountainous region of Seir, who were invading Judah, and they struck each other down. And the Ammonites and the Moabites turned against the inhabitants of the mountainous region of Seir to destroy them and annihilate them. And when they finished with the inhabitants of Seir, they helped to destroy one another. So without lifting a sword, Jehoshaphat's enemies are crushed. This is a resounding victory, isn't it? Jehovah has Israel's enemies turn on each other. Former friends and allies instantly become enemies. Verse 24, let's look at that now. But when Judah came up to the watchtower of the wilderness and looked down to the crowd, there they saw the carcasses fallen to the ground. There were no survivors. Yes, again, a total and absolute victory. Now, yes, admittedly, this was thousands of years ago. Much in human history has changed, much in society has changed. But what hasn't changed? Well, when it comes to Jehovah, nothing has changed because he is still the most powerful. He still loves his loyal ones, and he will still act on their behalf. So we can keep this in mind, this whole beautiful account, because during Armageddon, when the enemy is at the gate wanting to do harm to God's people, the righteous, all we have to do is to be like Jehoshaphat and his men, just to stand still and see the salvation of Jehovah. So we considered how to prepare. Well, let's now consider how to prepare. What can we do? Well, we have advanced warning of what's happening. And it's like that of a hurricane. When it's coming to bear down on a certain area, it doesn't just happen. Well, no, there's advanced warning of it. But for instance, let's say that you were in that path of the hurricane and unable to leave. Well, what would you do? You do the logical thing, prepare, stock up on supplies, cover the windows, make sure the generator has gas, everything like that. Because if that wasn't done, it could be a life-threatening situation to find yourself in. And likewise, again, we have advanced warning of the Battle of Armageddon coming up. But do we need to run to the store and start stocking up on supplies and fuels, things like that? No. Let's see 3 points in the things that we do need to do. The first is to look to Jehovah for direction in all aspects of life. This will help us be prepared. So again, look to Jehovah for direction. The psalmist David, he set a wonderful example of this. Let's see what he did at Psalm 25, verse 15. What did David do that we can imitate? Psalm 25, 15, he said, "My eyes are always towards Jehovah, for he will free my feet from the net." Where were his eyes? They were always looking toward Jehovah, constantly asking for his direction in life. And what was the result of that? It said in the B portion that he will free my feet from the net. In other words, he will help guide David in the best course of action for success. Do we want to be like that? Absolutely. So how can we be like that? How can we make sure our eyes are always towards Jehovah? Well, one way, and a great way, is to study God's word, the Bible, and then apply its wise teachings. Now, is reading God's word easy? Not necessarily, because there's much that demands our time in life, family matters, work matters, some recreation, things like that. But when we make time to study the Bible, when we become more familiar with it, it starts to reach our hearts, it changes our minds, our way of thinking. Well, we realize how beneficial it is, and then what we start to do is to develop a longing to continue this Bible reading. But when we read and we learn, it's important to, again, apply its wise teachings. That can be illustrated like that of a stop sign. We're approaching it, we know what it means, but if we don't apply what it means, it can lead to disaster. And that's the same thing with Bible's word. So we make sure that we apply it in our day-to-day lives. Now, the second way we want to prepare ourselves and to be like David is to ask for Jehovah in guidance, for his guidance in prayer. Let's look back at 2 Chronicles 20, the account we read over of Jehoshaphat, verses 4 and 5. We won't read it, but there we saw that Jehoshaphat could have chosen to fight. Again, call up the able-bodied men, flight, flee in panic. But he did neither of those. He took an option, the third option that's only available to God's people. He waited on Jehovah. He wanted to see his salvation. He didn't ask his men, his just human advisors, what should I do? No, he went to Jehovah, consulting him, asking for help and guidance. That is a fine example. So we could think of that of ourselves too. Are we doing that? If we have a serious illness, a serious situation, are we praying to Jehovah? Absolutely, no doubt. But what about in the small matters, big, medium, small decisions? Should I apply for this new job? Should I buy this car? Should I do this or that? If we incorporate Jehovah into the decision making, what are we doing? We're welcoming his blessings and showing that his way is the most important. His way is best. Well, let's look at Psalm 25:9 now. We'll go back to David's account. David says about Jehovah, he will guide the meek in what is right, and he will teach the meek ones his way. So look at the absolutes here. David says he will guide the meek. He will teach the meek ones. Remember, for us, though, we have to be meek and realize that our way, though it could lead to some success, God's way always leads to success. Now, the final way we can look to make sure our eyes are towards Jehovah is to make decisions based not on our understanding, but according to God's. But why is that easy? Why is that difficult to do? Well, outside these four walls is a world that says, live life your way. Be a trailblazer. Let your conscience be your guide. But why is that false thinking? Because doing that means trusting in ourselves, trusting in our heart. And there's a saying that the heart is treacherous. It will betray us because the heart wants what it wants. So then we meditate, what are the benefits of asking for Jehovah's direction? It can be illustrated like this. The next 60 seconds, what will it bring? We have a pretty good idea, but there is no guarantee. Jehovah, however, he sees far into the future. So when we trust in him, all we're doing is we're guaranteeing success and then avoiding the pitfalls and tragedy of life. And then again, what it does is it shows him honor, acknowledging that his way is superior. Now, let's look at another point. How do we look for direction from Jehovah in all aspects of life? That is to remain united with fellow worshipers of God. There's many different ways to do that, but we'll look at two ways. One is what we're doing right now, right here, either on Zoom, on the phone, or in person. It's regularly attending meetings. We go back to, we don't need to read it, but back at 2 Chronicles chapter 20, verses 4, it said that the people of Judah then gathered together. Verse 13 said that all those of Judah were standing before Jehovah, along with their little ones, their wives, and their children. Yes, whether young or old, they strove to be together in faith, following Jehovah's direction. The result was, again, that Jehovah protected them from their enemy. Not separate, but together. How can we apply this? Well, no doubt, maybe even happened today and sometime in the past is we felt this day was too much. I'm just going to stay home, relax, and I'll make sure to be at the next meeting. And I hardly ever miss the meeting, so it's okay. But we felt, no, that's not the right attitude. And we went to the meeting, and after that concluding prayer, how did we feel? Well, one word is likely invigorated. Why? Oh, it's because of God's Spirit being there, the information being shared, but also because of the friends that were there. They help us, they motivate us, they encourage us to keep going. But remember likely that we were not the only ones who felt that way. So it's important not just to be there to take in upbuilding friendship, but to make sure to give upbuilding friendship too. And then another way is our ministry when we're working together. Mark 6, chapter 7, Jesus sent his apostles out by two. Now think about that. He could have sent them out each one and covered twice as much territory, but he had them go together. And why was that? Well, no doubt they would help each other, encourage each other. When one was feeling down, he would lift them up. Well, one could improve his ministry by doing this or that. His friend would let him know to help them be more successful. They were together. The preaching work now is no different. Yes, we're at the meetings, but this time can be short and we might be spending just time with one or two. But in our ministry, we're able to really get to know a person or just a core group of people to get to know more about them and improve our friendship with them. So far, we've looked to Jehovah, to remain united with fellow worshipers, but there's also one more piece to the puzzle, and that's to trust and obey direction from Jehovah's representatives. So we'll break that to two portions. Well, why trust them, and how can we show that we obey them? Well, Jehoshaphat, where did he get his direction from? Was it a glorious angel coming down, giving him that direction? No, an ordinary man, Jehaziel. But it was obvious that he was being used. So for us in our application in modern times, We know that those who are taking the lead in this organization are the governing body. Does that mean that we have blind faith in them? No, we should never have blind faith, but we should look at the hallmarks Jesus said at Matthew 24, verse 45. Let's look there. Those he would be using would have these qualifications. Matthew 24, verse 45, likely familiar to many here in the audience. He said, who it really is the faithful and discreet slave, whom his master appointed over his domestics, to give them their food at the proper time. Those hallmarks were that they would be faithful, never betraying or abandoning Jehovah, Bible truth, or God's people. They would also be discreet. They would be humble and showing good judgment in directing the organization. Does this mean, however, that we should expect perfection from them? No. From those taking the lead in the governing body to those here locally, no one would claim to be perfect. But we always want to remember that who appointed them? It was the Master, Jesus. Now, how can we show that we obey the direction that we receive? Well, verse 20 of our account of Jehoshaphat, it says that they rose up early the next morning and went out. They could have said, well, Jehovah's already guaranteed us victory. Let's stay in today, make sure we have a good rest, we'll have a nice breakfast, then we'll go out when we feel good enough, we feel ready. That's not what happened. They woke up early and they were prompt. It resulted in saving their lives, showing that they wanted to follow Jehovah's direction to the T. For us too, it's no different. The direction we receive now, and especially critically in the future, is very important to follow. So yes, we spoke about a hurricane and that advance warning. Well, following the direction, heeding how serious it is, what does that do? It leads to safety and life. And when we do these three things, we look to Jehovah for direction in all aspects of life. We remain united with fellow worshipers. And then we trust and obey the direction from Jehovah's representatives. That too leads to life and safety. Because much like that hurricane that's about to make landfall, can anyone stop that from happening? No, not at all. And the battle of Armageddon that's soon to come, no one, certainly no one, can stop that from happening. So during that time, what should we expect? It's going to be a time like no other. We know that for sure. Well, immediately before the war of Armageddon, Satan, the devil, will cause the nations to make a final assault on God's people. Yes, he riles them up, attacking the righteous. But we should not be worried. Remember, when this occurs, it's according to God's will. Remember, there is no need to worry about doing battle. All we need to do is imitate the fine example of Jehoshaphat and his people. Remember, he went to Jehovah for instruction. He didn't trust himself or others, just Jehovah. And when he received the direction, he didn't question it. No, it may have not seemed logical from a human standpoint, but he followed the direction and was rewarded. For us, it will be no different, as long as we follow that direction as well. So that during Armageddon, will we fight or flight? Neither. We're going to take a third option available only to God's people, but we're going to stand still and see the salvation of Jehovah.